Good afternoon, it's the 16th of January and you're watching Arirang News coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-ho and it's good to have you with us. Progress towards the North Korea-U.S. talks is picking up speed after reports saying that President Trump sent a letter to Kim Jong-un last weekend. There is now talk that a North Korean official is on his way to New York to restart long-stalled negotiations with Washington. For more on this story and our other top headlines, we turn to Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jong-un. That's right. According to CNN, Kim Jong-un's right-hand man and key nuclear negotiator Kim Myung-chul is visiting Washington this Thursday. CNN reports that Kim Myung-chul will stay overnight and meet with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. It's not clear whether he'll meet with President Trump, but that would be the expectation from the North Korean side. The two sides are, of course, working out the details of their possible second summit, and there are signs it's coming together. According to CNN, Trump sent a letter to Kim Jong-un last weekend, and 2 weeks before the first summit last year, Kim Myung-chul met with Pompeo in New York. South Korea is not yet reviewing the reopening of the Gaeseong Industrial Complex or the resumption of tours to Mount Geumgangsan. This is according to South Korea's Foreign Affairs Minister Kang at her quarterly press briefing on Wednesday. Minister Kang said that Seoul and Washington are closely coordinating on what could be Washington's corresponding measure for Pyongyang's denuclearization steps. But they're not, she said, at a stage where Seoul is reviewing the options. She said ultimately it depends on what the two traditional foes agree on, which could possibly include a declaration to end the Korean War, humanitarian aid, and the establishment of various channels between the North and the U.S. Economic cooperation is something North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he is willing to do with South Korea in his New Year's address. In other news, at the South Korean presidential office, the focus today was on the economy. President Moon was briefed on this year's economic policies, and with the Lunar New Year holiday coming up, also ways to make sure people have stable livelihoods. Briefing the president, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said the government will launch 2 corporate investment projects worth $3.4 billion in the first half this year, and said special grants will be given to struggling industrial regions with high unemployment. The president, meanwhile, called for active follow-up measures to help companies launch new investments. These would be a follow-up to the meeting he had just yesterday with the leaders of Korea's biggest companies. The presidential office also says that the finance ministry, along with the Chamber of Commerce, will do more to get rid of unnecessary regulations. And the government will come up with a new support group for certain industrial sectors like fuel cell vehicles and non-memory semiconductors. Now, coming up on the president's business-related schedule, his office said, is another event on the 23rd, this time with his economy-related ministers. After the one last month, this will be the second of its kind. In the first one, the president showed he is determined to push ahead with his policy of income-led growth. This time, he'll be promoting fair trade, another of the administration's main policies. This week, South Korea has been under record-breaking levels of fine dust pollution. The government said it's taking strong measures to get rid of the dust, but the problem is most of it comes from outside the country, namely from China. Lee Seung-jae has more.
South Korea's Baekneungdo Island, an island off the coast of Incheon in the West Sea. Located near the northern limit line, the area is rich in oceanic fauna and bird diversity, and is considered one of the least polluted parts of South Korea. While the island usually sees 10 to 30 micrograms of fine dust on a normal day, starting last Friday, levels began to skyrocket, going from 97 to 120 micrograms, before eventually peaking at 159. Satellite images show fine dust levels soar on the Korean peninsula when western winds blow in from China. Not to be mistaken for clouds, the images you're watching show toxic smog and fine dust being blown in from China's northeast.
Most of the worst fine dust comes from outside Korea. The rapid rise of fine dust concentration levels is due to overseas factors, and it seems to be smog from China.
While there's plenty South Korea can do to reduce its own emissions, researchers say it's clear the only possible way to solve the problem is to get China to take the fine dust issue much more seriously. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
One way South Korea is trying to tackle the fine dust problem is by getting rid of coal-fired power plants in favor of more environmentally friendly sources of energy. In a long-term plan announced today, the Energy Ministry said it'll do that in part by making coal more expensive. But in turn, that means energy becomes more costly overall. Yoon Jung-min has the details.
The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy plans to reduce the use of coal and increase renewable energy to tackle the severe fine dust pollution in the country. The government's long-term energy supply plan will run from this year until 2033. According to the ministry, energy from coal-fired power plants, which is considered a major cause of air pollution, will be cut from 45.4% to 36.1% of the country's total energy supply by 2030. Liquefied natural gas and renewable energy are likely to replace it, as the government plans to increase their proportions to nearly 20%. Meanwhile, nuclear energy will be reduced following the government's policy to move away from nuclear power. The ministry plans to raise the costs of coal-based energy by including emissions trading and environmental costs, which had been excluded from its price to reduce the use of coal. Currently, power is supplied based on fuel costs to seek economic efficiency. The least expensive sources of energy, such as nuclear and coal power, were preferred, but the new plan will reduce the price gap between coal and LNG and allow more environmentally friendly energy to be generated. The energy shift, however, is expected to raise overall electricity charges. The ministry plans to close coal-fired power plants that have been operating for longer than 30 years and replace some of them with eco-friendly fuels such as LNG or wood pellets. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, dust pollution isn't only a problem for South Korea. Cities in China and India are famously polluted, and this week Thailand has seen extreme levels as well. It's especially a problem in the winter. Our Hong Yu looks at some ways these countries are dealing with it.
Fine dust is not just a problem for South Korea, but for other countries in Asia as well. Thailand, India, and China are all struggling with fine dust that has blanketed major cities and will remain a problem for the rest of the winter. January is the dry season in these regions, and polluted air is building up in the atmosphere without any precipitation nor wind to thin it out. So these countries are coming up with their own ways to deal with the problem. The Thai capital fired a water cannon into the air and hosed down streets on Monday as Bangkok saw high levels of hazardous PM2.5 fine dust particles.
Spraying the water droplets will help the particles join together and cause them to drop to the ground, just like rain that helps clean the smoke and pollution.
The government also handed out masks to protect people from the air pollution. Beijing, with over 500 micrograms of fine dust per cubic meter, prohibited fireworks as these are seen as a contributor to the pollution. And one of the world's most polluted cities, New Delhi, India, had a hazardous air quality level last Friday. To try to deal with it, the city stopped all construction and had water trucks spraying the streets. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has announced several measures to deal with sexual misconduct in sports, following allegations that coaches have been sexually assaulting young athletes. First is a general investigation. Today it said those leading the probe will include the National Human Rights Commission. The ministry had said last week it would be led by those outside the sporting community. Also today, the sports ministry said it has requested a probe of elite training centers, such as the Jincheon and Taedong sports villages, to see whether athletes there have experienced harassment, malpractice, or misconduct. The ministry says it'll also set up a sports ethics center specifically focused on misconduct and appoint senior female supervisors to check on the well-being of female athletes at the training villages. I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
It seems more and more likely that a long-anticipated second summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and US President Donald Trump will happen, and relatively soon at that. Reports say Trump has sent another letter to Kim, while sources suggest that the two sides are preparing for high-level pre-summit talks as soon as this week. Lee Ji-won reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump sent a letter to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un over the weekend, according to CNN. Citing a source familiar with the ongoing denuclearization talks between the two, CNN on Tuesday reported the letter was flown all the way to Pyongyang and delivered by hand. It's not clear what the letter is about, but the two leaders have been exchanging letters in the past few weeks. Kim allegedly sent one late last year, which Trump referred to as a great letter and replied. While the leaders are actively exchanging letters, CNN's source also said the vice chairman of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party Central Committee, Kim Yong-chol, could visit the U.S. as early as this week to finalize details of the upcoming second Pyongyang-Washington summit, which is highly expected to take place sometime next month. Kim and his counterpart, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, were supposed to hold talks last November, but Pyongyang postponed them due to scheduling issues. Although speculations are rising that high-level talks between Kim and Pompeo could take place this week, the White House is yet to give any official comment, while a State Department official said there is no meeting to announce, according to Reuters on Tuesday. Meanwhile, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee arrived in Beijing Tuesday morning. Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency quoted Choi as saying, when asked about North Korea-U.S. talks, that she was on her way to Sweden for an international conference. While it is unclear which conference Choi was referring to, speculations are mounting that she could be sitting down with U.S. officials to prepare for the second Kim-Trump summit. 이지원, Arirang News.
For more on these latest developments, we have with us Dr. Bong Young-sik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you back on the show.
Good to be here.
So as we heard from that report, it seems that Trump has sent a letter to Kim Jong-un last weekend. We don't know exactly what was in the letter, but we know it was delivered apparently by hand, by plane to Pyongyang. What do you think would have been in the letter?
Well, I mean, we can only make some speculations about the actual content of the letter, but this is a good sign because in the era of the internet and the SNS, and for a president who likes to just send tweeters to the entire nation and the world, sending personal letter by hand is a good sign that United States is also very serious about making the second summit with Supreme Leader of North Korea, take place. So I think the groundwork is being laid by both leaderships.
And it definitely seems like after the new year, with this kind of continuation of this letter diplomacy that they engaged in last year as well, that things really are picking up speed for the next North Korea-U.S. summit.
Right. But we cannot underestimate the hurdles lying in front of the leaderships in Pyongyang and Washington. It is good that both leaders are likely going to get together to deal with all these problems lying between them. But at the same time, as we have witnessed for the entire year of 2018, actually carrying out the agreements in details is still very, very challenging to both leaderships. So meeting taking place is, of course, a welcome sign, but at the same time, we have to wait and see how. After the second summit meeting between North Korea and the United States, things will actually play out to help realize important goals for both sides. For North Korea is ending the hostility between North Korea and the United States and setting normalization between the two adversaries. And for United States, apparently achieving a verified and complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula.
As you mentioned, the fact that he sent a letter from this president who normally does tweet everything, does that perhaps suggest that there was something more discreet that he wanted to send to Kim Jong-un?
I think so. North Korean leadership wants two things. Of course, the top priority for North Korean leadership is to escape from the existing sanction regime, at least in partial way. And in addition to that goal, North Korean leadership needs to, deal with its security concern, the so-called hostile policy of the United States, aiming at the collapse of the republic in North Korea. So North Korean leadership is going to try at least one of these two goals in the upcoming second summit meetings, and in exchange, the United States would be going to pressure Kim Jong-un leadership to, fulfill additional concrete steps toward the, full final and fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. So I guess so-called negotiations to accomplish kind of a small deal as opposed to a big deal lying between the two countries must be the part of the content of the letters being exchanged between the two leaderships.
On the back of these letters as well, now we're hearing reports that the senior North Korean official Kim Young-chul is on his way to New York to hold talks with his U.S. counterpart, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and that could happen as early as this Thursday, reportedly. But we've been down this road before. We've had talks where they said they're going to meet, it hasn't happened. Do you think it will happen this time? And what do you think they will talk about? Do you think it'll just be about setting the dates for the North Korea-U.S. summit, or will they actually have more discussions about the specifics of denuclearization, do you think?
Well, I think the focus will be setting the date and venue of the second summit meeting because Mr. Kim Young-chul is not a professional diplomat or expert on nuclear or missile matters. He is a trusted government official by supreme leadership, but he himself does not have the expert knowledge or diplomatic skills to get to the details of the likely agendas that will be put on the table between U.S. President Donald Trump and his boss, Mr. Kim Jong-un, in the second summit meeting. So I guess his main mission is to prepare for the second summit meeting, not actually, tighten the, bolts about the agendas that will be negotiated between the two leaders. But that's a good sign because this is the basic framework agreed by both leaderships. Important matters will be decided by top leaders, and officials at the working level will carry out the detailed aspects of the big agreements forged by the two leaders.
At the same time, there's also we also know that North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee is on her way to Sweden for an international conference, and there's also speculation that there she'll meet with a U.S. Special Representative on North Korea, Stephen Biegun, and that is a meeting that has been long in the works. Maybe they'll finally meet after they were set to meet last year, but that meeting never materialized either. Do you think what are the chances they will actually finally meet this time here in Sweden?
Yeah, the chance that they will be finally meeting this time is very high because it was a very perplexing that North Korean government avoided any meeting with Stephen Biegun, appointed by the Trump administration as a point of the contact representing the U.S. government, because Mr. Kim Jong-un, as a supreme leader of North Korea, actually vowed that he would arrange working level meetings between North Korean government and the U.S. government to carry out the details of Singapore summit meeting. But the supreme leader's promises were never carried out. That's a very unusual for the political system like North Korea. So we can make some educated guesses about why working level meetings involving Mr. Stephen Biegun, have not happened. One, hypothesis is that Kim Jong-un was never serious about, making this working level, meetings, take place. He just want to play the good cop and making Kim Young-chul, a bad cop, delaying or even stopping any working level meetings with the United States. But as North Korea has been engaging in the delaying tactics, the sanctions remain in place, and North Korean economy has not, escaped from very difficult situations. So I believe that Kim Jong-un reached the kind of a tipping point to make the decision that this time we are going to actually negotiate with Washington once again. So it is the right time for, North Korean government officials to actually have, serious negotiation with their U.S. counterparts.
But the thing is, they were meant to meet months ago, Stephen Biegun and Choi Sun-hee. And so, for all signs suggest that North Korea have not wanted those two to meet. I mean, but the question is, do they really need to meet? Because Normally with North Korea, so far that we've seen, is everything has been top down with where the two leaders meet or the high-level talks as well. And there are other supposedly lower-level talks happening as well under the surface. So what do the meeting between Stephen Biegun and Choi Sun-hee, what does that bring to the table?
What will that bring to the table? I would highlight two things. One is that both leadership might have learned good lessons from the Singapore summit meeting that took place last June. That even though big pictures might be agreed by two top leaders, they must have realized that they have to let the working level negotiations a chance to materialize the big picture, so that some summit meetings between top leaderships will not go nowhere. I think that they must have learned some lessons after they had this historical summit meeting in Singapore in June last year. That okay, our job is to make the roadmap, but in order for our roadmap to actually get materialized, we have to mobilize the working level negotiations. Otherwise, then we can't just have series of summit meetings every year. The second thing is that this is a good sign that working level meetings are going to take place between North Korea and the United States, meaning that North Korea cannot just solely rely on communication with the White House alone. It has to deal with working level government officials like Special Representative Mr. Stephen Biegun in order to keep the ball moving in the direction that would help realize North Korea's own preferred goals and interests.
So we're narrowing down the details of what this denuclearization deal will look like. And earlier you mentioned the difference between a small deal and a big deal. A big deal is where there's full denuclearization and full lifting of sanctions. But that at the moment seems unlikely and unrealistic. Right now there's talk of a small deal where North Korea gives some sort of concessions to the US, maybe a nuclear facility here and there, and the US gives some sort of concession towards sanction as well, just easing of sanctions. Do you think that's probably the most realistic path we're looking at for now?
I would belong to the camp of people who would be very cautious about this small deal. Because off the top of your head, you might just consider small deals are small steps toward the ultimate destination. But we have to caution ourselves whether a small deal is not small deal, but small deal will not, or small deal will eventually lead to the big deal, but small deal may make it permanently impossible for North Korea and the United States and other countries actually achieve the big goal, the final and fully verified denuclearization on North Korea. Because we have been on this road before. It was not called a small deal, but it was called as an early harvest approach. Because getting the complete denuclearization of North Korea is such a big goal, in the past, the US government chose the early harvest approach that we have to just make a small achievement so that we're going to use them as a building block to build trust, mutual trust. And it is better than gaining nothing about denuclearization of North Korea. So example of the fruit of this early harvest approach by the Bush administration was North Korea's agreement to destroy the cooling tower in Yongbyon. But what happened after that? Nothing. North Korea's WMD capability and nuclear weapon material have increased, not decreased. So small deal may just create the hole, although small hole on a water dam. And once the floodgate is open and economic sanction loses its pressure on North Korean leadership may find it unnecessary to carry out its promises for final and fully verified denuclearization in North Korea. Why would it? If it's free from pressure of economic sanctions, even partially, then its motivation to give up its nuclear weapons and missiles will be weakened, not strengthened. But Moon Jae-in government made a different argument, opposite argument that partial relief of economic sanctions will incentivize its Kim Jong-un leadership to move in the direction of economic prosperity, not reliance upon nuclear weapons. So time will eventually tell if a small deal approach will be chosen by Trump administration in the second summit meeting with Kim Jong-un, whether it would help achieving FFVAD, final and fully verified denuclearization, or it will let North Koreans off the hook once again.
Anticipation is definitely finally now building. Anyway, that's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in today and sharing us your thoughts.
You're welcome.
We here at Arirang News will, of course, update you on that situation with the North Korea-U.S. talks throughout this week, so do stay tuned for our later newscasts. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.